So we're going to continue with the Wasp. No, not the hairband Wasp. We're going to be working on the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing our build of the iconic Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, specifically focusing on the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine. This engine, known for its immense power, played a pivotal role in the aircraft's success during World War II. As you can see here, I'm working on replicating the wiring for the Pratt & Whitney engine. Of course, this is a scale model, so it's not perfect, but I'm drilling in holes to run the wires through, just as they would be on the real aircraft. These panels are like formed sheet metal, and I had to drill through them to accommodate the wiring. This really gives the model a more authentic feel. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp is a two-row 18-cylinder radial engine, one of the most powerful piston engines built during the war. Introduced in 1939, it powered a range of aircraft, including the F-4U Corsair.
That's what the Japanese called it, served mainly in World War II in the Pacific Theater, the F-4U Corsair.
And the P-47 Thunderbolt. Known for their ruggedness and heavy firepower. With the displacement of 46 liters, the R-2800 could produce 2,000 to 2,800 horsepower, enabling the P-47 to outperform many of its rivals. Its turbo supercharger allowed for sustained high-altitude performance, which was critical in European combat. Drilling in extra holes for the wiring and ensuring everything fits snugly is time-consuming, but worth it. This is the first engine where I've added this level of detailing, and the learning curve was steep, but the outcome was quite satisfying. The R-2800 engine's design was innovative for its time. The two rows of cylinders were arranged in a staggered pattern to reduce frontal area, which improved the aerodynamics of the aircraft. Each cylinder was equipped with dual ignition for reliability, and the engine featured an efficient exhaust-driven turbocharger. The supercharger allowed the P-47 to perform exceptionally at high altitudes, giving it an advantage in bomber escort missions and ground attacks. This engine design also incorporated sophisticated cooling systems to prevent overheating during prolonged fights. The P-47 Thunderbolt, powered by the R-2800, was a force to be reckoned with. It was one of the heaviest fighters of World War II, weighing in at nearly 8 tons when fully loaded. Despite its size, the Thunderbolt's speed and firepower were unmatched. The R-2800 engine allowed the P-47 to achieve speeds of over 400 miles per hour. And with its 8 50 caliber machine guns, it was a nightmare for Axis forces. The engine's reliability and the aircraft's durability earned it the nickname the Jug. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp didn't appear overnight. Its roots stretch back to the 1920s and 30s, when radial engines became increasingly popular for aircraft due to their simplicity, power, and the ability to cool effectively. Pratt & Whitney, founded in 1925 by Frederick Rentschler, focused on improving engine reliability and performance, which led to the creation of earlier versions like the R-1340 Wasp. By the mid-1930s, advancements in engine materials and design allowed for larger, more powerful engines. Pratt & Whitney engineers, led by Leonard Hobbs, set out to develop a twin-row radial engine that could produce significantly more horsepower. The result was the R-2800, a marvel of engineering with 18 cylinders that could produce up to 2,800 horsepower. The development wasn't easy. Early prototypes faced cooling issues and mechanical failures, but thanks to extensive testing and innovations in cooling design, the R-2800 became one of the most reliable engines of World War II. The engine's two-row arrangement allowed for a more compact design, reducing the frontal area of the aircraft, improving aerodynamics. This, combined with improvements in cooling and the introduction of high-strength materials, allowed the R-2800 to operate at higher power levels without overheating. The P-47's development began in 1940 when Republic Aviation was tasked with creating a high-performance fighter that could engage enemy aircraft at high altitudes and provide ground support. Republic's lead designer, Alexander Cartverley, knew that the aircraft would need to incorporate a powerful engine to meet these demands. Initially, Republic tried to build a lighter aircraft, but the addition of the R-2800 engine meant that the P-47 was destined to be a heavy, robust fighter. Cartverley embraced this, designing a plane that would take a beating, carry heavy armaments, and still perform at high altitudes, where dogfights were common. The early prototypes, including the XP-47A and the XP-47B, underwent several design revisions. Engineers had to accommodate the massive engine and its turbo supercharger, which took up significant space in the fuselage. The result was the Thunderbolt, one of the heaviest and most heavily armed single-engine fighters of the war. The P-47's turbo supercharger was a critical component located behind the pilot in the fuselage. This device compressed air, allowing the engine to maintain power even at high altitudes, where thinner air would normally reduce engine performance. This gave the P-47 a distinct advantage over many other fighters, especially in European theater air battles where altitude was key.
The turbo in your 47 is simple in operation, much simpler than Jimmy's. The actual compressing of air is done back here in the rotor. Exhaust gases turn the bucket wheel, which drives the impeller of the compressor. The waste gates in the exhaust system control the speed of the rotor by opening and closing, and thus directing more or less gas against the bucket wheel. The waste gates are operated by a regulator. The regulator, in turn, is controlled by the pilot when he changes the control setting on the quadrant. When you establish a control setting, the regulator will automatically operate the waste gates to maintain manifold pressure. As you increase altitude and decreased atmospheric pressure causes engine power to drop off, the waste gates gradually close. More exhaust gas is directed against the bucket wheel to make it rotate faster and compress more air. Now another indicator becomes important, the turbo overspeed warning light. When your P-47 nears its critical altitude, the rotor will reach about 18,000 RPM, and this light will blink. When the light stays on steadily, you have reached the maximum allowable speed of the turbo under normal conditions, 18,250 RPM. Anything that moves has a speed or stress limit, and that goes for the wheel and impeller of the turbo. They're not designed to hold up long at speeds over 18,250 RPM. The blinking light is a warning. The steady light means you've reached the critical speed of the turbo. Above critical altitude, you reduce manifold pressure to keep the warning light blinking while you continue to climb.
When the P-47 entered service in 1942, it quickly proved its worth. Initially designed as a high-altitude interceptor, it soon became a versatile aircraft, excelling in multiple roles.
This is original.
Yes, as it should be, yeah.
Everything was clean. Yeah. And this is an older piece too. This is 1860s. You know,
Its firepower, consisting of 8 50-caliber machine guns, made it lethal in dogfights and highly effective in ground attack missions. The aircraft could carry bombs, rockets, and external fuel tanks, extending its range and increasing its effectiveness as a fighter bomber. The P-47's combat performance was remarkable and could reach speeds of over 430 miles per hour, and with its rugged design, it could withstand significant damage and still return to base. Pilots fondly referred to it as the Jug, short for Juggernaut, reflecting its durability and firepower. Variants of the P-47 were produced throughout the war, with improvements in range, armament, and electronics. The P-47D, for example, introduced a bubble canopy for improved pilot visibility and increased fuel capacity, further enhancing its versatility. The P-47N, the final variant, was designed for long-range escort missions in the Pacific Theater. Its extended wings and increased fuel capacity allowed it to accompany B-29 bombers on long sorties, providing cover deep into enemy territory. The P-47 played a critical role in several major campaigns during World War II. During the Normandy invasion in 1944, P-47s flew countless sorties, providing close air support to ground troops and destroying enemy infrastructure. Its ability to carry bombs and rockets made it an effective ground attack aircraft, strafing and bombing enemy tanks, trucks, and trains. In Operation Market Garden, P-47s were again instrumental, supporting Allied ground forces as they advanced through Holland. The aircraft's rugged design allowed it to absorb damage from anti-aircraft fire and still return to base, a testament to the durability of both the P-47 and its Pratt & Whitney engine. In the Pacific, the P-47 served in both air-to-air and ground attack roles. The P-47N, with its increased range, was vital in escorting bombers during the final phases of the war. Pilots flying the P-47 in the Pacific Theater praised its ability to engage Japanese aircraft in high-speed dogfights, while also being capable of low-altitude bombing runs. By the end of the war, P-47s had flown over 500,000 sorties and were credited with destroying 7,000 enemy aircraft in the air and on the ground. The combination of the rugged P-47's airframe and the powerful, reliable R-2800 engine made it one of the most successful aircraft in World War II. The combination of the rugged P-47 airframe and the powerful, reliable R-2800 engine made it one of the most successful fighter aircraft of World War II. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt and its Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine, not only technological marvels, but also crucial tools in securing Allied victory during World War II. Their legacy endures not just in history books, but in the aircraft restorations, museums, and scale model builds like the one we're working on today. Unfortunately, during this process, I managed to break off a couple of the end pieces on the ignition harness, and I'm just basically replacing that with some evergreen rod that I've drilled a hole through. Turned out pretty good in the end. One of the R-2800's standout features was its ability to perform well at high. One of the R-2800's standout features was its ability to perform well at high altitudes, thanks to advanced supercharging systems. The engine used a mechanically driven supercharger, often in a two-stage configuration, to compress the intake air and compensate for the lower atmospheric pressure at higher altitudes. The two-stage supercharger allowed the engine to maintain power output in the thinner air of higher altitudes, making it ideal for fighter aircraft like the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt and the Voigt F-4U Corsair, which operated at altitudes up to 30,000 feet or more. An intercooler was included to cool the compressed air between the stages of supercharging, reducing the temperature of the intake air and increasing engine efficiency. There were cylinder and valve innovations. The R-2800 used overhead valves, 2 per cylinder, operated by push rods. The engine's construction featured cylinders with deep cooling fins to help dissipate heat, a significant improvement over earlier air-cooled engines. The adoption of sodium-filled exhaust valves was another critical innovation, helping to reduce valve temperature by transferring heat more efficiently to the valve stem, where it could be cooled by the cylinder head. Aluminum alloy was used extensively, especially in the cylinder heads, to reduce weight and enhance heat dissipation. The sodium-filled valves, by cooling the exhaust valves, the engine could run at higher power settings for longer periods without overheating, a necessity for combat operations. The R-2800 used the Stromberg or Bendix carburetors, which were specifically designed to provide accurate fuel-to-air mixtures at various altitudes and throttle settings. The engine also used a system known as anti-detonate injection or water injection in some models. This involved injecting a mixture of water and methanol into the intake manifold to cool the incoming air, allowing for a higher boost pressures without the risk of detonation, engine knock. The engine typically used high-octane aviation gasoline, 100/130 octane or higher, to maximize performance, with the option to inject a mixture of water and methanol to further increase power during combat or takeoff. The R-2800 was known for its exceptional reliability and durability. In wartime conditions, engines needed to withstand extreme operational demands, from freezing altitudes to scorching low-level operations, and the R-2800 was designed with this in mind. The engine's ease of maintenance was another reason it became a favorite among military forces, as mechanics could easily access key components, reducing downtime for repairs. Despite its high-performance output, the engine had a relatively long service life and could be overhauled multiple times during its operational lifetime. The engine used a dry sump oil system with external oil coolers to maintain stable operating temperatures. The R-2800 was produced in a variety of versions throughout its long service life. Each new variant was optimized for different aircraft and missions. The R-28-21 was used in the F-4U Corsair and P-47 Thunderbolt. This early variant produced around 2,000 horsepower. The R-2800C series featured more power output with slight redesigns to improve airflow and cooling efficiency. The R-2800CB series developed post-war. These variants were used in civilian aircraft and featured modifications for better durability and fuel efficiency. Some of the famous aircraft powered by the R-2800 included the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the Voight F-4U Corsair, the Douglas A-26 Invader, and the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. The R-2800 not only helped win World War II, but also powered many post-war commercial and cargo aircraft well into the 1960s and beyond. Its remarkable engineering made it one of the most mass-produced engines of the era, with over 125,000 units built. For this mini-art model build, the intricate design of the R-2800 represents both a technical masterpiece and a symbol of engineering resilience, encapsulating how advancements in engine technology were pivotal to 20th century aviation. Here I'm using some of the cyanacrylate CA crazy glue removal stuff to get rid of the excess and tidy things up a bit after using some black CA to secure these wires in place. This is the first engine like this that I've ever done any of this kind of detailing to. So it was a bit of a learning curve, and yeah, I learned a lot. I've probably forgotten a lot of it now, but you know, I hope to be able to do another one of these soon and reinforce that. So again, here I'm drilling some extra holes that require, you know, for the wiring. And yeah, you can, I would suggest you do some of this drilling before you glue everything together. I think that's how I would do it next time. But like I say, you know, this was a sort of live and learn kind of process. Once all the wires are in place, I came back with some Vallejo and sort of a yellow color that I matched with some reference images I saw. I guess this is some kind of an insulation. Okay, now that we've done all the wiring, I can start to paint out these ignition wires with some Vallejo, and the color I'm choosing is sort of a yellowy color, and it kind of matches some of the reference photographs I've seen out there. But this definitely is finally moving on from that boring drilling and threading and gluing and having things fall off and then re-gluing, and anyways, moving on. I'm gonna try a different brush. Ugh. I'm gonna use a longer brush. So with all the handling and the maneuvering and the messing around, there needed to be some touch-ups on all the silver stuff. So that's what I'm doing here with some, I believe it's AK water-based silver. So I picked out some of the nuts and bolts that are on the front of the engine, and now I'm going back in and adding a little bit more flavor to the exhaust using different mediums and some oil washes, etc. Okay, as you can see, I'm going back into the exhaust and trying to add a little bit more realism by adding more layers. And yeah, so this is kind of an enjoyable part of whenever you're doing model building. If there's an exhaust that you can make rusty, that's a fun little thing. Here I'm mounting the front and rear mounting brackets, I guess you would call them, and they've been separately painted with a zinc chromate from Tamiya. It's got the yellowish kind of tinge to it. So that'll get glued in place. And that's going to get mounted to the firewall, if that's what it's called. And that's been previously painted with a metallic color as well. And then finally what we're doing here is we're going to add the air filters,
which is number one, wrong.
Oil coolers, which I painted separately. Interestingly, once the engine is fully assembled, many of these smaller components won't even be visible, but the attention to detail really elevates the build. It's been quite the journey getting to this point, and there's still more to come in the next videos as we continue working on this iconic aircraft. In the meantime, and in between time, that's another edition of Jet Scale Models. Y'all come back now, you hear?